Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at ancient prophecies.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. We've got articles from Ancient Origins talking about Mayan predictions, Nostradamus, all that fun, kind of mysterious stuff.
Yeah, the big question is, are these just, old anxieties? Or could they actually tell us something about today?
Right, exactly.
Huh.
So let's start with the Maya. They had that whole 2012 thing, remember? Everyone thought the world was ending.
Oh, yeah, December 21st, 2012. Big day. It was, well, technically the end of their long count calendar, like a 5,125-year cycle. Pretty sophisticated system they had for tracking time.
Yeah, they were way ahead of their time with astronomy and math and all that. But did it really mean the world was ending?
Well, scholars always said it was more like a new era, not an apocalypse, but, the public imagination kind of took over. Apocalypse is definitely more dramatic.
For sure. But okay, so it's not just a random date. This cyclical view of time, what were they getting at with that?
I think it challenges how WE think about time, We see it as a straight line, start to finish. But for the Maya, it was all these cycles, constantly repeating, renewing. Endings were also beginnings.
Huh. So instead of fearing the end, they saw it as a fresh start.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of refreshing, especially these days when everything feels so chaotic and constantly changing.
It is. I mean, think about all that's happened just since 2012. Technology, society, climate change. Maybe we did enter a new era, just not the doom and gloom one people imagine.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe the world didn't end, but that 2012 thing got us thinking about time differently. It's not just a straight line. It's a cycle. Now let's move on to another pretty famous guy, Nostradamus. He lived back in the 1500s, said he could see the future, wrote this book called Les Prophecies.
Ah, Nostradamus. Full of mystery.
Right. It's got like 942 of these four-line verses, quatrains they're called. The people have been trying to decipher for centuries. Some even think he predicted 9/11.
Oh, yeah, there's that one that goes, "In the year of the new century and 9 months, from the sky will come a great king of terror."
The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. Chilling, right?
It are striking, but Nostradamus is also super vague. I mean, that could apply to lots of events, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I guess that's why people can find all sorts of predictions in his work. It's like, if it's vague enough, it can fit anything.
Right. So is he really seeing the future or just tapping into these, I don't know, like universal fears that humans have always had?
It's like famine, floods, fire. He wrote about all that. Stuff we're still worried about today with climate change and everything. Maybe it's less about specific events and more about these timeless anxieties.
Yeah, it's like no matter the time period, some things just stay the same.
Huh. Maybe that's what prophecies are really about. Not predicting the future exactly, but warning us, about repeating those same mistakes over and over.
Like a cautionary tale. Instead of a roadmap, it's more of a, hey, watch out, you've been down this path before and it doesn't end well.
Okay, I like that. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about a different kind of text. The book of Revelation in the Bible.
Yeah.
That one's got some pretty intense imagery, apocalypse, war, disease. It even talks about the Antichrist.
Oh yeah, Revelation is vivid, to say the least. It was written when early Christians were being persecuted, lots of upheaval.
Right, so maybe all that symbolic language, like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, maybe that was more about giving people hope in tough times than actually predicting the future.
Could be, like even when things are bad, good will eventually win out, that kind of message.
Makes sense. Although, some people do take Revelation pretty literally, right? Like connecting those symbols to stuff happening today. Pandemics, wars, even things like digital currencies, that whole mark of the beast thing.
Yeah, it's interesting how those ancient anxieties about control and power can be mapped onto modern concerns, even if there's not some literal beast figure out there.
Right. It's like those themes are always relevant, no matter what form they take. But okay, so maybe these prophecies aren't so much about specific events, but more about these underlying patterns of human behavior, the things we keep doing wrong, and the consequences that follow.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to humanity and saying, look what you're doing, learn from this.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So it's less about predicting the future and more about, encouraging us to be more self-aware, to make better choices.
Exactly, and maybe that's the key to understanding these prophecies. It's not about what will happen, but what we can do to create a different outcome. So, before we jump into more of these prophecies, I thought it'd be cool to talk about oracles, like these pronouncements that leaders would look to, especially in times of crisis.
Oh, yeah, like divine advice, right?
Yeah.
Was that common back then? in lots of cultures.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The Romans, for example, they had these Sibylline oracles. They were these verses kind of prophetic that they'd consult for anything, like war, famine, politics, all that.
Right. Interesting. What kind of stuff did they warn about? Any themes that stand out?
Well, a lot of it was about, society falling apart, greed, corruption, stuff that still worries people today.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess those anxieties are always there, huh? Was there like a specific line from these Sibylline oracles that kind of captures that?
Yeah, actually, there's one that says, beginning with the earliest race of men, even to the latest, I will prophesy of all things past and present, and to come in the world through the wickedness of men. Heavy stuff.
Wow, that's intense. It does seem like that worry about moral decline is kind of universal. So were they trying to steer leaders toward being more ethical or just reflecting the fears of the time?
Tough to say. Probably a bit of both. They definitely reflect those fears, but also like a reminder that, hey, greed and ambition, if you don't keep them in check, bad stuff happens.
It's like a warning, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting because alongside these warnings, there's often this promise of a golden age. Like after all the suffering, things get really good. You see that in lots of cultures.
Oh, that's true. Kind of like even after the darkest night, the sun comes up again.
Yeah.
So was that meant to give people hope or to, I don't know, motivate them to actually create that better future?
Right. I think it's a bit of both. It speaks to that deep desire we have for a world where things are good, peaceful, prosperous, all that.
Okay, so it's comforting, but maybe also a challenge. Like, hey, this could happen, but you got to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to just fall into our laps. Speaking of taking action, how about we head over to the American Southwest now? We got to talk about the Hopi prophecies.
Oh, yeah, the Hopi. They're Prophecy Rock in Arizona, right? The one with all those petroglyphs?
That's the one. It's believed to hold like visions of the future etched right into the stone. What's really fascinating is how connected they are to nature.
Yeah, the Hopis are known for their sustainable way of life, right?
Right.
Living in balance with the earth.
Exactly. And their prophecies, they warn about what happens when we lose that connection. Greed, exploitation of resources, the stuff that leads to destruction.
Yeah, sounds familiar. But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? There's that whole thing about two paths humanity can choose.
Right. One leads to harmony, sustainability, all that good stuff. The other, well, not so much. Chaos, destruction. But the point is, we get to choose.
Okay, so it's like a fork in the road. Our choices matter. But the Hopis aren't just sitting around predicting doom, are they? They're actually living that sustainable life they talk about.
That's what's so powerful about it. They're not just saying it, they're doing it. Their prophecies are almost like a blueprint, a guide for how to live in a way that doesn't destroy everything.
It's like they're saying, hey, this is what works. This is how you survive.
And thrive, too. It makes you wonder, though, how realistic is it for our modern world to fully embrace that way of life? I mean, can we even begin to apply those principles in our society?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It does seem kind of daunting, but maybe it's not about becoming Hopi exactly. It's more about learning from them, taking those core ideas like community, respect for nature, and seeing how they fit into our modern context.
Yeah, exactly. Finding those points of connection, adapting them to our own challenges. Because ultimately, it's not about predicting a bleak future. It's about actively building a better one.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. These prophecies, they're warnings, they're guides, they reflect our hopes and fears. But how does all this ancient stuff actually play out in our lives today, in the 21st century?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because technology, which is so defining of our times, it's actually feeding this whole fascination with prophecies.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Think about it. We've got access to so much information now. Ancient texts, different interpretations. It's all at our fingertips. And that's really fueled a resurgence of interest, especially among, younger generations.
That makes sense. When the world feels kind of crazy and unpredictable, it's natural to look for answers, even in ancient wisdom. But technology is not just about information, right? It's changing how we live, the ethical questions we face. There's that whole anxiety about being controlled, surveillance, all that. Does any of that connect back to the prophecies we talked about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember that Mark of the Beast thing from Revelation? People are drawing parallels to data privacy concerns today, digital currencies, the power tech companies have over us. It's like those old fears about losing freedom. They're just manifesting in new ways.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it that way. Like, are we sleepwalking into some dystopian future?
But technology can also be a force for good, can it? Connecting people, spreading knowledge, helping us solve problems like climate change. Do any prophecies have a more optimistic take on that?
It's interesting. Some interpretations of the Hopi prophecies suggest that tech, IF, used wisely in harmony with nature, it could actually be a tool for healing and transformation.
Oh, so it's not about rejecting technology altogether. It's about being mindful, using it ethically, aligning it with our values.
Exactly. It's a tool, right? And any tool can be used in different ways. It all comes down to the choices we make. Right. Okay, so technology is one big piece of the puzzle. But what about globalization? The world's so interconnected now, for better or worse. Those warnings and prophecies about conflict, environmental collapse, they feel even more relevant now, don't they? When what happens in one place affects everyone else.
Absolutely. We can't just ignore those warnings anymore. But globalization also brings opportunities. Connecting different cultures, fostering cooperation, we can learn from each other, find solutions together.
Right. Like maybe by embracing that global perspective, seeing ourselves as part of something bigger, we can actually tackle these huge challenges.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity. And maybe, just maybe, that's how we get to that golden age that so many prophecies talk about. It won't be through isolation, but through working together.
So are these prophecies just warnings then? Or are they also invitations?
Yeah.
Invitations to learn from the past, make better choices now, and actually create a better future.
I think they're both. They warn us about the pitfalls, the mistakes we keep making, but they also offer guidance, inspiration, this reminder that we're not just passive bystanders. We have the power to shape our destiny, both individually and collectively.
It's like they're saying, hey, this is what could happen, but it doesn't have to. You have a choice.
Exactly. It's not about fate. It's about empowerment, choosing the path we want to walk.
Powerful stuff. So as we wrap up our deep dive into these ancient prophecies, what's the one thing you really hope listeners will take away from this conversation?
I think it's that these prophecies, even though they come from way back when, they still have so much to say about today, about how we navigate the world, make decisions. It's not just about predicting events. It's about understanding human nature, seeing those patterns that keep repeating, and then choosing to do better, living in line with our values.
Beautifully said. So as we go forward, let's remember, the future isn't something to be afraid of. It's something we create with intention, wisdom, and that belief that we can build a better world, a more peaceful, just, and sustainable one.